How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance to win your questions being answered, drop a comment down below. And trust me when I tell you this, no question is too small. There might be the smallest question that will benefit not only you, but somebody else watching this video either today or in the future. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the weekend. It is, what are some early signs of a failing timing belt tensioner? So this is specific to Honda's J series. Everything up to the current J series that is now transitioning to a different style timing belt tensioner. But anything before the J35YA found in the 23 and newer pilots, or the 26 and newer passports, or the MDX/TLX Type S engines, all have this tensioner that I am referring to. So first things first, and this is before anything else, there's usually going to be some sort of a leak issue. Now I'm going to try to attach a picture of a said leak, but oftentimes it is hard to look for unless if it's on a lift. If you have a lift, or you could jack it safely underneath and take a peek, or sometimes you look for the top, then great. So this is a timing belt tensioner here that was failing, and the timing cover goes just across this right over here. And typically we'll see, and you can see the stain right over here of the leak coming from the piston here all the way dripping down in here. And you can usually see this right over here without removing anything. You just have to either look at it from the top or the bottom. It depends on your situation. You may or may not be able to see this. After this starts leaking, after some short time, there's going to be a start of a knock or a ticking or a tapping while the car is cold. After the car warms up, it does seem to subside and eventually stop tapping. Initially, if you let it go on, then it continues to knock because there is no longer any fluid here holding this piston up. And now, while I can't really do this one with my finger, oftentimes when I get bad enough, you could push them down with your finger. And if I push this one on a bench, let's say, I will surely be able to push this piston down. Now think about it. This piston holds all the timing tension for your belt. So if this is bad, eventually it ends up damaging this guy here, which we can see a cutout here where, not this one, is a different one. This one's round. Let me see if I can get this here for you. This one is round here. It's rounded piston. Now, when they get flat enough and they start making this indentation here, then this becomes flat. Regardless, you're replacing these, but you end up damaging these, which are close to $200. So typically, we do not change these. The bearing does not go bad unless if it's damaged by this guy, which again is if you start hearing that tapping noise and you ignore it, eventually you just end up costing yourself more money. So just keep that in mind. Before anything, this guy will be leaking and you will see it right over here. And then it'll tap. After that, it'll tap indefinitely while the engine is running, damaging this guy. I've seen this to where the piston comes out completely, either from the front or the back side here. And this little notch here breaks off. And then at that time, usually jumps timing. 9 out of 10 times, it will damage the valves. Sometimes it doesn't. But most times, if you're on a highway, it's going to damage the valves. And again, it's going to cost you way more money than it was ever needed to if you just listened to your car and looked at it and had it inspected thoroughly. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so next question is, and this was particular to a 23 Pilot, but this will apply to basically any car. Should you do OEM or aftermarket windshields? So OEM windshields is always a better option for a couple of reasons. The glass is usually better. Some of these cars have acoustic windows and stuff like that. So typically, you'll have a higher quality windshield right from OEM, even though they do break too easily. Secondly, if you have one of these vehicles that has, Honda sensing with the camera on the windshield, sometimes it's not placed exactly where it needs to be, and it ends up setting codes, and we cannot aim them because the camera is in a wrong position. Additionally, depends on the installer here. Sometimes, and this happens with OEM windshields too, they install them just off center or just a little bit too low, causing an issue with us not being to aim it and program it correctly. So OEM is always the best option. I understand some of these cars, including my car here, has a windshield on back order since like July. I can't get my hands on one, so I refuse to put an aftermarket, so I'm just going to wait for until one is available. Although if you're in a pinch, if it's really bad, whatever your case may be, try to use a reputable company. Pay with a debit card or a credit card would be the best option here. In the event that something happens and you can't get your camera programmed, then you could get refunded and whatever steps you need to do to get it done properly. we always have them installed at our dealership. Now we hire a third-party company, but we use a reputable company that we've been using for years. We aim them afterwards, and we don't have any issues as long as we're installing OEM windshields. Again, OEM windshields are very expensive, but you get what you pay for in this instance, and I would always choose OEM windshields versus anything else. Additionally, sometimes when these windshields don't have the proper adhesive or not enough adhesive, eventually we start seeing some rust across the top of the roof line and or some water leaks and wind noise and stuff of that nature. So just be careful who's installing them. Try to use OEM windshield. Google the reputable places around you. Try to use your local dealer if possible. They're going to sublet it, but it is what it is. It'll be on them. And like that, in the event something happens down the road, you have something to fall back on. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So the next question is, are these expansion tanks still having issues with them leaking? And the simple answer is yes. And this all started with the 10th generation Honda Civics. Typically, it was the Type Rs and the SIs where the two halves of the tanks were splitting and causing a coolant leak. Now, this issue does seem to continue into the 11th generation Civic and the current generation Integra Type S, which is essentially the same thing as a Type R. Now, the issue is, once again, there's actually two issues with them. One of them is they're opaque and they're very hard to see. Sometimes I have to take a bright flashlight with a very strong LED to get a good coolant level reading. As they get older, they get more yellow versus the tan color or the white color that they initially are. So it makes it harder and harder to see. Additionally, and the real issue is the two halves are made out of plastic and essentially glued together or welded together, plastic glued, whatever you want to call it. And eventually under pressure, they do seem to crack. So this type of design is only on some Honda models and Acura models, and the most recent one being the TLX Type S, which we are starting to see issues with them splitting as well. Now, this was always a concern of mine, considering that they are constructed the same way as the Civics and the Type Rs and stuff like that. So this was always an issue of mine and concern initially when the car came out, and sure enough, we've had our first failed documented case. There might be more there. I'm not sure. Now, there is aftermarket solutions out there for this. When you get one from Honda or Acura, they're essentially the same design. I don't believe they've been updated because, again, we're seeing failures on the 11th generation stuff as well. So if it was updated from the previous gen, then they wouldn't be failing on the current generation. So they are failing. There's aftermarket solutions for the Civic and the Integra. Unfortunately, nothing for the TLX Type S, although I am working on getting something made for those, for the aftermarket market. And again, if your car has warranty, take it to your local dealer. If you don't want to deal with it, if you want to try to avoid a fail point, this is something that you should look into. If you're tracking your car, do not go to the track with the OEM expansion tank. Chances are it's going to crack on you and start leaking at the track. That's usually when we see most of these cases, although sometimes they do leak just by normal driving. So the nice thing about the aftermarket stuff too, usually they have a lot clearer sight glass or some sort of indicator which tells you the level, much easier to see, and they're usually made out of aluminum or billet or something like that, where they don't expand and start leaking with high pressures in the system. So hopefully that answers this question for you. The next question is, and this particular viewer had a question with this a CRV hybrid having a rough transition from just a hybrid mode to the ICE engine mode. So, and this is pretty normal for these vehicles. They do have a very rough transition when it initially goes into running the ICE engine. Now, initially when I heard one of these, I thought it was abnormal. Now, knowing that, this is kind of a normal situation and a normal characteristic of these vehicles, I understand that this is normal. Now, he took it to his local dealer and they told him they couldn't find anything. Maybe they thought something with the leaking injector, although when we have typically leaking injectors, there is misfires associated with that. So I don't think that's his issue, although if these cars are in limp mode, it absolutely sounds like the engine is not running good and something internally wrong with it, but there's usually nothing actually wrong with them. So what I would recommend at this point, if you have one of these vehicles, if you're concerned with that rough transition, I would take it to your local dealer, have them compare it to a different one, obviously same type of vehicle, and see if it's comparable or not. If it's more extreme than the normal situation, then something may be going on. But in most cases, and it's really crazy to even be saying this, it is a very rough transition and a normal 9 out of 10 times. I haven't had one that wasn't louder than the next one or quieter than the one before or anything of that nature. So it's just a horrible transmission. There's no better way to explain it. If you have one of these vehicles, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you happen to have a check engine light and it transitions at that point, then it completely runs horrible, and it just sounds like something is going into catastrophic damage. But once that initial issue is fixed, then that transition becomes smoother, yet not as smooth as a normal running starting engine. So hopefully this is a question for you. Last but not least, question of the week. And once again, if you want a chance to win your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below. Now, if you're changing your battery and you don't have a battery saver, so what a battery saver does, it saves the memory of the ECUs and stuff like that on the vehicle, so it doesn't completely go berserk when you start the vehicle back up and loses memory complete. Now, if you do it quick enough and you change over your 12-volt battery quick enough, chances are it won't completely reset everything, because sometimes when we have some wacky issues, we actually need to do what's called a battery cable reset and have these cars reset for a couple minutes, 10 to 15 minutes at times, to completely reset all the systems. Now, his concern was, will idle learn be affected, and will the transmission patterns be affected as well? And that question is hard to answer, because again, it depends on how quick you do this. Now, if they are reset, it's not a big deal. It's going to learn your driving habits once again pretty quickly. If it isn't reset, then nothing is going to be changed, and most people won't even feel the difference, to be honest. So if you have a battery saver, great. Don't go rushing your 12-volt battery to try to save all the memory and stuff on all the computer systems. If you don't have it, when you turn the vehicle back on, you're going to have a whole bunch of lights on your dashboard. After driving it for a couple of blocks, sometimes you need to cycle the ignition off and back on, and all the lights will be cleared. It's not a huge deal either way you approach it. And now if you have a memory saver of some sort already, great. I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy one just to change a battery every couple of years or so. Unless if you're doing this on a daily basis, then it's a good idea to have one. We used these battery savers back in the day more for radio codes, when you had to actually pull them out if you didn't have the serial number or you weren't able to get it by doing a 1 in 6 cheap method, just to save us headaches from having to pull out the radios. That was the biggest thing that we did with these battery savers, at least back in the day. Nowadays, I don't think it's such a big deal, besides setting all the lights on, which again, they do clear after a short period of driving them. Sometimes you have to cycle the ignition off and then on again. So hopefully that answers the question for you, and I'll catch everyone on the next one.